The boundary we often assume exists between our bodies and our minds is an illusion, one that shapes how we experience reality itself. What if the sensations we feel, the thoughts that run through us, are just threads woven into the same fabric? Exploring this hidden connection can transform how we see ourselves, unlocking mysteries about consciousness and the essence of being alive. Stick around, because unraveling the mind-body illusion might just redefine what you thought was separate and reveal how deeply intertwined they truly are. The concept of the mind-body illusion, the idea that our sense of self might be an illusion, challenges the deeply ingrained notion that mind and body are inherently separate, fixed entities. Modern neuroscience and psychology reveal that what we perceive as a unified consciousness is actually a complex construct created by a multitude of brain processes. Our brains synthesize sensory data from various sources, vision, touch, proprioception, and more, to produce a coherent experience of self that seems undeniable. But in reality, this experience is a kind of virtual reality generated internally, which can be manipulated, distorted, or even dissolved through certain psychological or technological interventions. Consider phenomena like the rubber hand illusion, where individuals can come to feel ownership over a fake hand just by synchronized visual and tactile stimulation. This experiment demonstrates that the boundary between the self and external objects is much more fluid than our everyday perceptions suggest. When visual input aligning with tactile sensation is synchronized, the brain updates its internal model of the body, accepting the fake hand as part of itself. Such examples highlight how perceptions of bodily integrity are, in essence, constructions, ephemeral stories woven from sensory inputs and neural computations, rather than fixed facts. This illusion extends beyond isolated experiments. In debates around consciousness, many theorists argue that the normal experience of a unified self emerging seamlessly from neural activity is an emergent phenomenon, an illusion created by brain processes that integrate information into a singular narrative. Some suggest that what we call the mind is merely a collection of cognitive modules, and that the sense of self is just a tightly woven story our brain tells itself to simplify the chaos of neural signals. If this is true, then the steadfast feeling of owning a body or experiencing consciousness might be more about the brain's storytelling than about any fundamental separateness or independence of the mind from the body. The implications of this illusion are profound, especially for mental health and identity. Recognizing that our self-model is malleable opens avenues for therapies involving body awareness and mindfulness that can fundamentally shift how people perceive themselves and their interactions. It also challenges dualistic notions, opening thought to the idea that mind and body are more intertwined than traditionally believed, functioning as different facets of a single process rather than distinct substances. When viewed through this lens, the self becomes a kind of narrative artifact, an adaptive, dynamic construct that can be manipulated, extended, or even temporarily dissolved, posing fascinating questions about what it truly means to experience reality. Historical perspectives and philosophical foundations. Throughout history, debates about the relationship between the body and mind have shaped philosophical discourse across cultures. Ancient Greece, for instance, saw philosophers like Plato proposing a dualistic view, where the soul was distinct from the physical body. Plato believed that the true essence of a person was an immaterial, eternal soul, and the body was merely a vessel, a temporary prison for the soul's journey. This perspective laid the groundwork for centuries of dualist thinking, influencing subsequent philosophical and religious traditions that held a clear separation between mind and matter. Meanwhile, in Eastern philosophies, a different approach emerged. Concepts from Buddhism and Taoism, for example, emphasize interconnectedness and the fluid relationship between body and consciousness. Instead of seeing the mind as separate from the body, these traditions promote the idea of a unified whole, where consciousness and physical existence are two sides of the same coin. The practice of mindfulness meditation, rooted in Buddhist thought, reflects this understanding by fostering the awareness that consciousness is embedded in and arising from bodily sensations, rather than being something separate or higher. During the Enlightenment, Thinkers like Descartes formalized dualism into a rigorous philosophical framework, proposing that the mind, viewed as a non-material substance, interacts with the physical body through the pineal gland. This notion sparked a cascade of questions about how intangible thoughts and feelings could influence physical processes and vice versa. It also aimed to distinguish scientific inquiry about the material world from spiritual or subjective experiences. The divide persisted, influencing scientific experiments that sought to understand the workings of the brain and consciousness, often treating them as separate fields. In contrast, many modern philosophical and scientific developments challenge this traditional dichotomy. The rise of neuropsychology and cognitive science underscores the view that consciousness emerges from complex physical processes within the brain. Examples such as brain injuries affecting personality or perception illustrate the deep interconnectedness of mental states and physical structures. These insights have shifted the perspective from a rigid separation to a more integrated understanding, where the mind is seen as an emergent property of the body's biological systems rather than a distinct, eternal entity. Scientific evidence challenging the illusion. Recent advances in neuroscience have punctured the long-held assumption that the body and mind are inherently inseparable entities. Experiments using neuroimaging techniques reveal that consciousness arises from complex networks within the brain, rather than being a seamless, unified property of the body as a whole. For instance, functional MRI scans demonstrate that specific mental states, such as pain or empathy, activate discrete brain regions rather than spanning the entire body in a uniform manner. This evidence suggests that our sense of bodily unity is constructed by neural processes, not some intrinsic, indivisible connection. Studies involving individuals with neurological conditions provide striking examples of the disconnection between sensory systems and perceived bodily integrity. Take phantom limb syndrome. Amputees often report sensations, including pain or movement, in limbs that no longer exist. This phenomenon underscores how the brain's neural maps, responsible for body representation, can persist independently of actual physical presence. It exposes the illusion that our sense of body ownership is necessarily anchored to physical reality and instead points toward a model where mental representations are master regulators, capable of existing and functioning separately from physical bodies. Further evidence comes from experiments involving virtual reality and body swaps. Participants can experience a sense of owning a virtual body different from their own, sometimes even in a different shape or size, which triggers neurological responses similar to real bodily sensations. For example, when individuals see a virtual body being touched, their brain often responds as if they are experiencing touch themselves, despite their physical body remaining untouched. Such studies challenge the notion that the mind is strictly tied to the physical body, demonstrating instead that our sense of bodily existence is highly malleable and dependent on perceptual and neural factors. Behavioral and cognitive research also points to the plasticity of mind-body boundaries. Techniques like mindfulness meditation can alter the sense of bodily presence and diminish the feeling of separation between body and mind. Moreover, cases of dissociation disorders, where individuals feel detached from their physical selves, show that psychological states can significantly influence bodily awareness without any physical change. This array of evidence collectively dismantles the traditional view that body and mind are inherently unified at a fundamental level, reinforcing instead that the perceived connection is a product of neural processes, not an absolute reality. Implications for consciousness and self-perception. The idea that the mind and body are interconnected challenges traditional notions of self as a distinct, separable entity. Instead, it suggests that consciousness emerges from and continually interacts with the physical processes of the brain and body. When we consider phenomena such as the rubber hand illusion, where individuals feel ownership over a fake limb they see being stroked in sync with their own hidden hand, the boundaries between self and environment become blurred. Such experiments illustrate that our perception of self is malleable and heavily influenced by sensory integration. This realization leads to profound implications for how we understand consciousness. If our sense of the body is constructed and adaptable, then self-awareness itself may be more fluid and less fixed than previously thought. From a practical perspective, this interconnectedness reshapes how people perceive their bodies and mental states. For instance, individuals experiencing chronic pain often report feelings of disconnection or alienation from their bodies. Yet studies have shown that visualizing or mentally altering their body image can reduce pain perception. This demonstrates that self-perception is not solely rooted in an immutable biological reality, but can be influenced by cognitive and sensory factors. It suggests that therapeutic approaches targeting body awareness or sensory integration might help address disorders related to self-identity, such as body dysmorphia or even certain aspects of depression. The implications extend deeply into the realm of self-awareness and personal identity. If consciousness is partly dependent on bodily sensations and perceptions, then altering these signals could fundamentally change how individuals perceive themselves. Virtual reality technology exemplifies this. A person can inhabit an avatar different from their physical form, experiencing a sense of presence and agency. Such experiences reveal that the self can be crafted and reconstructed based on perceptual input rather than fixed traits. This understanding could lead to new insights into personal growth, empathy, and even the development of non-corporeal modes of consciousness, where the boundaries of self are shaped, expanded, or temporarily dissolved by manipulating sensory and cognitive inputs. Finally, embracing the mind-body unity prompts a reconsideration of consciousness research itself. It raises questions about whether consciousness is localized within the brain or spread across the entire bodily system, as some embodied cognition theories propose. This view underscores the importance of bodily states, posture, and movement in shaping conscious experience and decision-making processes. For example, studies show that adopting expansive or constrictive postures influences confidence levels and emotional states, hinting that self-perception is not solely a mental phenomenon, but intricately woven into our physical presence. It invites us to see ourselves as living, sensing creatures whose identities are continuously negotiated at the intersection of body and mind. Osnovnoy, Razděl 5. The idea that the mind and body are distinct entities has long been challenged by scientific and philosophical research. Modern neuroscience reveals that our sense of self, what we often equate with consciousness, is deeply intertwined with physical processes in the brain. For example, neural activity in areas responsible for sensory perception, motor control, and emotional regulation all contribute to our unified experience of being a body. When a person suffers from a stroke affecting the parietal lobe, they may lose their sense of body ownership, even though their physical body remains intact. This demonstrates how fragile our perception of bodily integrity can be and underscores the complex relationship between physical brain states and subjective experience. The concept that the mind-body relationship is an illusion is rooted in the idea that what we perceive as a distinct mind separate from the body is actually a product of neural processes. Take, for instance, phantom limb syndrome, where amputees feel sensations or even pain in limbs that no longer exist. These sensations are generated by the brain complex and suggest that our conscious experience of a body part is reconstructed internally. It's not necessarily that the body is separate from consciousness. Rather, the brain creates a unified picture which can be deceived or altered, making the boundary between body and mind appear more distinct than it truly is. Cutting-edge experiments with virtual reality further blur this line. In controlled settings, individuals can be made to feel as though a virtual body is their own, even if it's a different shape or size. Such illusions highlight how adaptable our sense of bodily self is and point to a crucial insight. Our perception of a stable physical body is just that, a perception. When visual, tactile, and proprioceptive cues are manipulated, the brain adjusts its model of the body accordingly. This demonstrates that the sense of being a unified, embodied consciousness is not fixed but constructed dynamically from sensory information, which means it might be an illusion fostered by neural processes. Overall, the notion that the mind and body are separate illusions invites us to reconsider what it means to be conscious. It suggests our sense of embodied self is not fundamental but emergent, arising from complex interactions within the brain. This perspective opens the door to questions about the nature of subjective experience, the basis of personal identity, and the possibility of altering perceptions of self through technological or psychological means. Exploring this further reveals how flexible and, ultimately, provisional our understanding of our own bodies really is, shaping future research in neuroscience, psychology, and even artificial intelligence. As we wrap up our exploration of the mind-body illusion, it's clear that our understanding of the connection between consciousness and physicality is both profound and complex. We've seen how our perceptions can shape what we believe to be true about the body, and how the boundaries we often consider as fixed are more fluid than they appear. This insight opens up fascinating possibilities for how we approach health, self-awareness, and even the nature of reality itself. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the intriguing relationship between body and mind. First, hope it sparked new questions and curiosity about your own experience of consciousness. If you'd like to dive deeper into these topics, stay tuned for upcoming videos where we'll explore consciousness, perception, and the brain in even greater detail. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. First, love hearing your perspectives. Until next time, keep questioning what you think is real, and stay curious about the intricate dance between mind and body.